New York State Senator Jessica Ramos is facing a primary challenge. Is that a consequence of endorsing Andrew Cuomo for mayor? We'll get into it. This is Nuance. I'm Mike Scala, an attorney and an MC, back from the road, joined, as always, by Jay Carter, also known as Timid, the hip hop artist in the chair of BLM Tokyo. Also back, I was going to say from the road, but I guess back off the plane. Yeah. What's going on?
From the road to travel, if we use the term the road as just to mean travel, yeah, we're both back from the road.
Back from the sky in your case, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So it was a 48-hour return trip total.
Woo. You know, it's
Yeah.
crazy. I just retraced my road trip, right? Looking at the distance that I traveled, 2,000 miles. However, the total driving time was only 1 day and change. So even though it took me to, 8 days approximately to complete this trip, because I did a lot of stopping obviously along the way, the total driving time of mine was actually still less than your total trip time.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Well, I mean, it was mainly the layovers, so I don't normally have this long of layovers. The generally it's about a 23-hour trip, and again, a bulk of that is a layover of like, yeah, 5 to 6 hours in one place, and then like 3 or 4 hours in another. Because the flight from Atlanta to Tokyo is about 13 hours direct.
Atlanta to Tokyo. Okay.
Right. This time though, I had a 15-hour layover in Atlanta and then another 15, 16-hour layover in Tokyo.
Wow. Can you call it a layover at that point? I feel like there should be another word for it, right?
You know
That's not
what?
a layover. We should invent a new word for that situation.
You know what? Like they didn't treat it as a layover because um I had to get my baggage. They're like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, it's the
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
next
That's what
day,
I'm saying.
right?"
That's not even a layover. That's just another trip, basically.
Right. And so you know what? I kind of, for at least for the Atlanta part, I treated it like that. So, you know, I've got cousins that live in Atlanta. KJ, he was on the show before, and his brother and sister live in Atlanta and stuff. And, they used to also live in New York at the same time.
Right.
And so I haven't seen KJ in person in about
Mm.
12 years at least. And
Wow.
so I was like, you know what? I'm going to be here for 15, 16 hours. Um, I spend that time with him
Okay.
and, the rest of the family. And so it worked out really good in that regard. So yeah, I was happy to utilize that. Now the one in Tokyo, I had a plan. I was supposed to do a video shoot with someone in Tokyo, and that fell through. And so I had to make other arrangements last minute because I couldn't change the ticket. So um ended up doing a capsule hotel at the airport. So
Mm.
it wasn't too bad.
So a capsule hotel, those are those joints where you're basically sleeping in a drawer?
It's quite a little bit bigger than a drawer, but yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
yeah.
Someone claustrophobic like myself, would I feel crazy? And I mean, you say it's a little bit bigger than a drawer. How much space? Is like being in a big casket or something? Like, what is it like?
No, like it's big enough. Like there are actually two types in this hotel that I was in, right? There are a variety of types in all different places, but the one that I stayed in, there are two types, and it's basically a you can sit up in the place. You're not like closed in. It's more like a shade curtain that you put down. So it's not like you're locked into any kind of a box.
Okay.
Um, there's a TV inside your capsule as well. Like there's space for that. So it's basically take the size of like a twin bed
Uh-huh.
and then put maybe a shelf on one side that's probably about like this wide, and then the walls go up on both sides.
I gotta take a look at this. It sounds like something that would freak me out. I really,
Well, see, and
really
here's the
want to
thing.
fight
There's
space.
also right. There's also another version, the premium version, that's a little bit more. upscale, and I think it's probably about 20 bucks more. This one though was
Ooh,
actually the bed plus there's a desk and there's like actual
wow.
room space in there. So there's a couple different types of capsule hotels.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You said it has a TV, so does it disturb other people who are close by? You said that it's just like a curtain. You're not boxed into a room. So if everyone has their TV on, isn't it noisy?
I would imagine it could be, but I guess you have the headphone jack there, so
Okay.
you're expected to put on your headphones.
Hmm.
What was also good about this one, it was right in the hotel, right in the airport, so I didn't have to leave the terminal. But there was also the hot spring in there as well,
Yeah.
like
Natural hot spring.
yeah,
You
I
would
don't know if
find
it
in
was
Yellowstone or something?
well the type that you go and soak in, right? You go
Yeah, okay.
and soak in hot water. It wasn't really hot, but yeah,
Gotcha.
so more of a spa type of thing. So that was
Okay.
cool.
Okay. Let me ask you this. I got so many questions. Like, how do you know it's a capsule hotel? I mean, someone like me, I don't read Japanese or anything, and it just looks like a hotel. Is there a way to clearly tell the difference between a regular hotel and a capsule joint, or do they have both in all the hotels? Or how would I know?
They don't usually mix both, so they're separate. And capsule hotels are going to be generally cheaper. In
Mhm.
many cases, in some places, depending on where you are, you can get capsule hotels for probably like 20 bucks a night or something like
Wow.
that. Really cheap. But it will say capsule hotel, or you have to ask the desk.
It'll say
Yeah.
that in English. It's written in English as well.
Sometimes, yeah, it'll say it in English. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So you
No.
said it's about 20 bucks for the night sometimes?
Sometimes, yeah.
Wow. And I
Yeah.
heard businessmen use these extensively in Tokyo because
Yeah.
oftentimes they have to work late and maybe they live far away. I think you told me once that companies will routinely move people in Japan, maybe across the country for their job, and they're kind of expected to be a team player, take the job, leave their family hours away, that kind of thing. There's pressure, social pressure for them to go out drinking, whatever events are going on. They can't really say
Yeah.
no culturally. And so oftentimes they'll be working late or with their coworkers very late and they live very far away, and so they'll just crash at one of these capsule hotels for the night, right? Like it's like
Yeah.
a life-saving thing for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They do that, or some live in, depending on where they're at, some live in internet cafes during the week.
Wow, they live in internet cafes.
So yeah, so some of the internet cafes here are generally a bit more extensive than they are what we think of in the States. So they'll have showers there. They'll have amenities, like vending machines with more than just snacks. You can get like bowls of ramen and this type of stuff. But instead of just like sitting a chair in front of a computer at a desk to use it, they have booths. And those booths are basically on like a futon type of thing to where you can fully lay down and stretch out. And they have showers in the internet cafes. So people who may live outside of the city in Tokyo and their commute might be 3, 4 hours because of whatever it was, they might just come in and after work just stay in at a internet cafe during the week and then go home on the weekends.
Wow, wow. And so I guess that's not discouraged by the cafes, right? Because you tried to hang around all week at a Starbucks here, they get very impatient with you.
Right. So yeah, that was one of a travel hack, so to speak. Like if you go somewhere in Japan, and say you don't need a hotel the whole night, right? Go do an internet cafe. Like I would do that when going to Osaka.
Yeah.
It's like I don't need a whole hotel after I go to the club or something like that. I'm leaving at 2 a.m. and the first train or bus is not until like, 7, 8. Why am I going to spend 50, 60, 70 bucks in a hotel room? I can go get an internet cafe booth, get some sleep, and pay like, I don't know, like 20 bucks, 15 bucks or something like that for the whole duration.
Wow. Wow. So yeah, I guess you can travel on the cheap there. I was thinking I was getting away with not paying a lot on the road here in the US because I remember driving between Louisville, Kentucky, or I guess I say Louisville.
Depends on where you're at. Louisville, Louisville,
Yeah, we would
Louisville,
say Louisville, right? But I think they have like more of a twang to it, so it's more like Louisville, right?
Louisville.
So I was,
Yeah.
by the way, very impressive skyline. I was surprised by that. I kind of thought of it as, yeah, it's a big-ish city, but it's in Kentucky. I guess I was underestimating it, right? When I drove past it, I was like, wow, this kind of has like a Manhattan-esque skyline. Louisville, who would have thought it? I didn't think that. So that was pretty cool. But then I crossed the bridge into Indiana, right? And stopped off at a hotel, $100 a night for the hotel. And it's a nice hotel,
Yeah.
like a little dumpy place, you know. Obviously, it's not like 5-star resort level, right? But for a hotel on the road, like, you know, like a Holiday Inn kind of place, Quality Inn, Comfort Inn, you know, those type of joints, right? It
Right.
was fine. $100 a night. You know, you can't get anywhere approaching that in New York. I mean, you go out to dinner in New York, you're paying more than that. So I was thinking,
That's
wow.
crazy.
Oh yeah. I was thinking, wow, like I'm actually maybe even saving money being on the road for this time because just living in New York oftentimes costs more than getting hotels and gas. And the food, by the way, is also cheap, right? I found a really good
Right.
Mexican restaurant in Kentucky, $15 for an entree, big burrito and everything. You know what I mean? You couldn't get that around here. Are you kidding me? So
Right.
it kind of puts things in perspective for you, I guess, a little bit like, wow, yeah, we are paying a lot in New York. But then again,
New
you come
York
back
is
to New York,
overpriced.
yeah, it's very expensive. But then you also come back to New York and you appreciate being here, right? And everything that it offers, right? The
Right.
diversity and you know, you can get any kind of restaurant anywhere. You can get any kind of food
True,
anywhere.
true.
That is a little tougher, you know, some of these days. Like I said, I did find that good Mexican joint in Kentucky. I was surprised. It was an authentic Mexican restaurant. I actually found pretty good bar pizza in a college town in Virginia, not like New York style pizza, right? It was a little thicker. It was like, you know, the bar pub kind of style, but it was very good. The crust was nice and crispy, and the sauce was sweet and good. Like it was good. It was quality pizza, you know. So sometimes people say you can't get quality pizza in places like VA. Well, sometimes you get lucky and you do. Not the same. Like I said, it's not New York pizza. Don't expect New Park or something like that, right? But for what it is, it was fine. You know, so you do feel excited when you find places like that, but I think they are fewer and far between, right? Like a lot of these places I was pulling over, looking up restaurants, and what's coming up mostly Applebee's if you're lucky, right? Most of the time it's McDonald's, Burger King.
TGI Fridays and
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, you know, if you want finer dining, I think you're going to find more of it in a place like New York, but you're also going to pay for it.
you didn't hit Waffle House on your road trip? You can't
Yeah,
go into the
yeah.
South and
At
not
least
go to
two or three
Waffle
times. At
House.
least 2 or 3 times I hit Waffle House.
Oh,
At least 2 or 3
okay.
times.
Okay. Okay.
There's also a place called Sheets, I think. Have you heard of this?
Sheets?
I think it's called
Never
Sheets
heard of that.
with a Z. It's a gas station.
Never heard of that.
You go inside and they've got food. Like it's kind of like a Subway almost, right? But there are these machines like when you go into McDonald's, oftentimes instead of taking your order, you got to like put it into the machine, right, and you get your number and
Right.
your food. They've got that, but it's a more extensive menu. It's kind of like a Subway. You can get Subway sandwiches and different things like that, right at the spot called Sheets, and they're all over the place in the South. I found them everywhere I looked. Sheets, 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 Sheets.
Wow. Never heard of them.
Yeah, yeah. So
Okay. Okay. Well, it sounds like it
presidential
was a
history on this trip as well, which I guess could be our segue into the political discussion. We want to talk about Ramos in the morning. But you know, when I go on these trips, I don't like to plan a whole lot. You know, I did meet up with my cousins for the first time in Nashville, which was dope. Obviously, I linked up with you in Charlottesville, which is dope, right?
yeah.
But aside from that, it was kind of like, all right, let me kind of make this loop around the South and the Midwest and stop where I stop. You know, when I feel like stopping, I'll stop. People say, why don't you book hotels in advance? That kind of defeats the purpose of it. It's kind of like you're just driving, you're being adventurous. And yeah, there are some drawbacks to it. I think some of those drawbacks might be too much for people, right? Depending on your personality type. Some people like to have everything planned out to the minute detail, right? So yeah, sometimes you'll get tired and you'll go to a hotel and they'll tell you there's no vacancy, and that's frustrating, right? And sometimes you go into 2 or 3 hotels and you get the same story, and then you're thinking, oh man, if I would have planned this in advance. But then there's a sense of excitement when you do get that vacancy, right? And I was kind of liken it to being on like a role-playing video game I used to play back in the day when you explore these different towns, right? And sometimes you run into trouble, but then you find that safe haven in the next town and you're like, wow, this is an adventure. So it's kind
So
of,
this was your live action Skyrim?
pretty much. So, and I always kind of travel that way, right? Even when I'm driving down to Florida, I don't call up a spot in the Carolinas in advance and make a reservation. No, like I pull over when I get tired and hope for the best. Right? That's the adventure. So in doing so, without really having a plan, it's kind of driving where I felt like driving, you know what I mean? Knowing I was taking this rough loop around, right, the region. But aside from that, it's like you stop where you want to stop, you see what you want to see. So I happened to come across some presidential history. In fact, starting just south of Nashville, there was James Polk's home. And then going north from there, you run into Abraham Lincoln's birthplace. And these are just signs, by the way, on the highway, right? Like I'm driving up and I'm like, oh, it says get off here for Abraham Lincoln's birthplace. I'm gonna do that. Then of course it puts you on Lincoln Parkway and you're driving for like 15 miles on this country road with no lights or nothing. It's kind of crazy in the dark, but you know, again, part of the adventure, right? You get to Abraham Lincoln's birthplace. You go further north. I was like, you know what? I'm in Kentucky. I never went up to Indianapolis before. I want to see what that's like. So I went up there, and as soon as I get into Indianapolis, is the sign Benjamin Harrison's home, presidential site. I'm like, this is my lucky day, right? This is turning into the presidential history tour. So I did a number of them. I just found out, and here's a drawback of not planning, I guess. I found out that Andrew Jackson's house was also in Tennessee. It was in Nashville, which I didn't even know about when I was in Nashville, right? I just stumbled upon the Polk home south of Nashville. I could have done the Andrew Jackson as well if I was trying to get the four presidents there. But, you know, like I said, it's fun. And I got some really good video, did a lot of learning, school experience. And I think being spontaneous, to me at least, is almost all the excitement.
Right. Okay. Okay. That's what's up. Sounds like you were, yeah, on the road. That's definitely on the road. So, looks like we might have lost you for a second here.
I am,
And now you are back.
yes, sir. So, by the way, you see the man cave sign
I
back there?
see it.
Yeah, I won that at the casino in Connecticut. Actually, the day before my trip, I was up there. I guess like the pre-trip, if you wish. And they had an arcade at the casino, right? I think it was something designed to keep kids occupied while the adults went to gamble, stuff like that. They even had a
Right.
daycare, which to me looked like a kid jail, right? It was actually kind of sad. Where you can drop your kid off at this daycare spot while you go gamble, and the kids are just in this room with people who work there, trying to keep them busy with cupcakes and stuff. So that's interesting. But this arcade was next to it. You know, like most things in the casino, they're designed to be ripoffs, I think, right? It's like you play these arcade games for tickets and then you try to win prizes, right? But then if you calculate how much money you're spending to win these tickets, obviously the prizes are going to be a lot cheaper than you actually just paid. Like I could have probably bought the prize for cheap. You know what I mean? That's kind of the game.
Absolutely.
But we also found this hack, I guess, like one of these machines.
Uh-oh. Are you dropping off some secret knowledge here?
Maybe, but it might be common sense also. So there's one of these machines in this place where you might have seen it. They have tickets on like a ledge. It's like a circular machine, like different stations where you can put your coins in or your card or whatever. And then the idea is you're supposed to stop like the crane at a certain point and push these tickets that are on this rotating wheel onto your ledge. And so when enough of them hit this particular ledge that you're on, it'll start to overflow and fall down the hole and you get whatever overflowed. So
Right.
basically, right? Basically, we noticed that there were some ledges that were pretty much already overflowing, and so once we just added a couple of tickets to those, we were like balling out with tickets. Right? It was like we were getting a lot of bang for our buck, I guess, on that particular machine because of the
Sure, sure.
status
You
of it
definitely
at
want to
that
look.
time. Yeah,
Yeah, you definitely want to look for those.
you know what I mean. If you're gonna do it, you
That's
gotta
the
do it.
strategy.
All right.
That's the strat
So
right there.
pretty quickly, I don't know how much money, we were having fun with it, but 2,000 tickets pretty quickly. All right, so what are you gonna do with 2,000 tickets? Right, this man cave sign just happened to be staring me in the face. I said, you know what? That's not a bad day at the casino arcade. So, it's a fun little thing. I figured let's put it up behind me for Nuance. See how it looks. It looks cool. You know what I mean? It's right next to the music stuff, like speakers and everything. So it's the man cave.
That's what's up. That's what's up.
All right. Well, we did say we wanted to talk about Ramos in the morning. Why do we call her Ramos in the morning, Jay?
because her campaign website looked more like a morning show, like a TV morning show designed website. Because it was the colors, I think, was one of the
Yeah.
things, like the yellows and blues
Yeah.
or something like that. It just and she just looked like she was like gonna read you the morning news or the traffic report or something like that. So,
Well, State Senator Jessica Ramos is from Queens, right? She, as we've talked about in the past, she originally ran for office as a progressive champion of sorts, a labor champion, right?
mhm,
Strong with the unions, but she challenged an incumbent Democrat who was seen as to establishment, in fact, closing up to Republicans at times, right? That was a big critique. The IDC thing, the Independent Democratic Conference, a power sharing
right.
agreement between certain Democrats and Republicans, right? Obviously, very controversial in New York. So she came in saying, I'm more of a pure Democrat, vote for me. And she kind of rode that wave that was kind of popping at the time, right? Around 2018 time. So she's been a state senator now. She famously, or perhaps infamously, depending on whom you ask, endorsed
Mm,
Andrew Cuomo for mayor, right? In the Democratic
mm,
primary. She was running for mayor, dropped out and endorsed Cuomo, and immediately faced a ton of backlash from these leftist progressive groups who I think felt betrayed more than anything, right? They're like, listen, I thought you came into office saying you're one of us, kind of thing. What are you doing?
mm,
So there was talk immediately thereafter that she would face a primary challenge now, right? Okay,
mm,
here we are. We don't have to wait long at all. I mean, you know, these Senate elections come up every 2 years. They're an even numbered years. So that will be next year, 2026. We're not even out of the summer of 25 yet. And she has herself a primary challenge. And that is coming in the form of Assemblywoman Jessica Gonzalez-Ramos. Not Ramos, she's Ramos. Rojas. See, it's kind of confusing because they're both named Jessica and they both have the R names. And so it's Ramos versus Rojas. Um,
okay.
but similar in more ways than
It
one.
sounds like a boxing match.
Yeah.
Ramos versus Rojas,
Yeah.
live in Vegas on pay-per-view.
Jessica, let me make sure I didn't butcher that name. Yes, Gonzalez Rojas. So, you know, they both got the four-letter R names that end in S and also contain an A. And they're both obviously Hispanic names. But here's also where they are similar. Rojas came in also riding that leftist progressive wave, also defeated an incumbent legislator, right? She ran against Michael Dendecker, I believe it was, who was in office for a while. It's kind of the same story, you know, in a way. Like she's coming to the left. Of course, this strategy works in certain districts. We've talked about that. You're not going to win this. You're running this way everywhere, but this particular part of Queens is pretty kind, or has been, I guess, to that
Mm,
lane of politics, right? So we're talking more like Western Queens, or more north than here, anyway, more north and more west than here, right? Like, you know, going more towards Astoria, the Jackson Heights area, right? Elmhurst, this kind of thing. So we have ourselves, like we said, a primary showdown now between Rojas and Ramos. And the question is it just an opportunistic power grab on the part of Rojas, or is it altruistic as it's being presented, right? It's being presented as basically you failed the purity test and now we're revoking your card type thing, right? But
yes. So you think like she's kind of being punished a little bit for
absolutely for endorsing Cuomo. But if the
mm,
critique there is that Ramos was opportunistic, right? She was in it for herself by making a pragmatic choice and not the political pure choice, I guess, that they wanted her to make. I'm sure they wanted her to back Mamdani and she didn't. Well, is it hypocritical, or does it seem hypocritical for Rojas to say, now I have an opportunity to take you out for being too opportunistic? Because she wasn't going to run
um
against her before, right? This only arose because of the Cuomo thing.
right, because she went with Cuomo instead of going for the nominee.
Yeah, the eventual nominee, right? He wasn't the nominee yet. This is a Democratic primary still before
Was
the
that you go against the family
right. That's basically what we're seeing here. You know,
type of situation?
I don't know. I don't know. How does this come off to you? Like I said, this seems to be the thing. Like she
Yeah,
didn't get a primary challenge, and Rojas stepped up and said, I guess I'll do it. You know?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, it does sound like it could be a blowback for endorsing Cuomo and not getting on board with the party.
It definitely is, and I wouldn't even say with the party. I would say with that lane, right, the progressive lane of the party.
Yeah, but I mean, this is because he's not endorsing Cuomo in the you know, or she's not endorsing Cuomo or getting behind that. So essentially, she's not towing. I don't know if towing the line is the word. Maybe it is the getting on board with the Democratic
Well, no, no, no. Well, hold on a
nominee.
second. No, no. Okay, Ramos endorsed Cuomo in the primary before there was a
Right.
Democratic nominee, right? There was an open Democratic
Right.
primary, and she was
Okay.
immediately attacked by the progressives because she did that.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I get that part. Right.
right,
Because he's more establishment.
right.
He's legacy Democrat. Mamdani is definitely the progressive, the other side. So I get that part. But what about, but now she's being primaried. Has she mentioned who, like, Cuomo is in the race as an independent.
Mhm.
Um, so has she stuck with Cuomo for the
That's actually a
general,
really good
or
question. I
is
don't
she,
know. We can look.
or is
We can
she
look to see that, but to tell you the truth, I'm not sure that would even matter though, because I think she was going to face a primary regardless, right? And people were saying that. I saw that.
because
So
of the
was the
initial
initial
choice?
endorsement of Cuomo, and they were like, "What are you doing? You're all you're doing is opening yourself up to a primary. You're definitely gonna get primary now." I mean, that was the talk. So immediately people started mobilizing around this,
Right.
right? She's gonna get primary. The only question is by whom. And now Rojas is stepping up, and I don't know. To me, it just so far it rubs me the wrong way a little bit, and I think that goes back to my New Yorkerness, right? Like I said, we don't like when you piss on our leg and tell us it's raining, right? Like they're trying to present this as this altruistic thing, like we're pure Democrats. You're an opportunist. Look at you. You made an opportunist choice and you're gonna be punished for it. But this is coming off to me so far as opportunistic in itself, right? So the hypocrisy of that is rubbing me the wrong way. Now, if
Wait,
Rojas
wait. What's coming off as opportunistic in itself?
seeing that Ramos was weakened politically, at least with her base,
Okay.
leftist based, and thinking now is the opportunity to win a primary against her and take her seat, because that wasn't going to happen prior to her endorsement of Cuomo, right? That this is what sparked that off. If you look, these progressives, people in this lane, right? These elected officials, they're a band. Like they don't primary each other for no reason. She wasn't Rojas
Right.
wasn't going to run against Ramos until this happened, and Ramos kind of made herself, I guess, the public enemy of that particular lane of Democrats. So
Right.
it's an opportunity. An opportunity arose for someone now who's in the assembly to elevate herself to the state senate by running against this perceived weakened Democratic incumbent. Now,
Right.
here's the thing: if Ramos took some unpopular votes or did some things in the Senate that people who are on the left take issue with, I would see it as less hypocritical. I might not agree, depending on what it was, right? We can get into the issues. But if there was something that truly betrayed that ideology, aside from the endorsements that you're making, I think I would see it maybe as less opportunistic and more justified. Although still, it's like it's the whole purity testing. But I get it. Everyone has a line, like we said, and maybe that would have crossed the line. I guess just endorsing Cuomo crossed the line. But to me, I think
Well,
I would
yeah.
want to see more than that.
Yeah, I get what you're saying there. Could it be, like you said, like if she'd done some certain votes or something like this
Yeah,
that basically showed that she wasn't who they thought she was.
right.
Um, could that be, endorsing Cuomo gives that indication to them, perhaps, because he is the legacy
Mm-hmm.
Democrat. Um, he did not leave office under, honorable terms, and so he's also seemed as a bit of a corrupt type of guy, one of those people that is uh, in that. that political turnstile that just keeps coming back and back type of thing.
Right.
Like that's kind of what they stand against in a
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
So it's like, you're going with him? Like I thought
Right.
this is
That's
you're over here
definitely
with
what it,
us.
that's definitely what it is. But I think you're drawing the line, which I think is implicitly what they're trying to draw as well. What they're trying to
Right.
say is her endorsement of Cuomo indicates something deeper, maybe than just that, right? It indicates how we think she's going to behave elsewhere, right? Just as a senator.
Right.
But
Right.
here's the thing: she has a record. She's been in the Senate for years now, so you can look at
Right.
her record, right? And to me, it comes off a little pretentious to be like, oh, she's not truly trustworthy as one of us because of this endorsement. It's going to mean, all her votes are going to be great. Look at her votes. Actually, look at the votes. It's not like you don't know what they are.
Right.
Look them up. So if they come out and they start talking that, maybe they're going to make a better case in my eyes. But for now, it's like, oh, because first of all, it was so predicted, right? It was like she's going to face the primary now. Yep, here it comes. And all right, fine. It's politics. People do that, right? It's like a shark spun blood in the water. I get it, right? It's a very cutthroat business. But I think to kind of present it as something other than opportunistic is what is kind of giving me some sympathy for Ramos here.
Right. No, I get it. And we've seen it before, right? I believe AOC faced a little bit of that pushback from the progressive left when she made a few statements, or she, moved a little bit more towards the center and on some things, and it was like, hey, you're supposed to be one of this, you know,
And
and
she
so
was
there was a little
also
bit of pushback.
completely opportunistic in how she came in, right? Presenting yourself as like some pure new, energy that's going to be all good and altruistic. Yet she was district shopping, right? She started running in one district she had no connection in, saw she wasn't going to win that seat, suddenly moved to a different district. And so, let's not pretend that there are political considerations. Well, let's not pretend there aren't these political considerations here, right? So you
Right.
see things like, let me pull up some of the tweets. And I hate to be knocking her out. She met her a few times. I think she's actually a really nice person. At least she's been nice to me, right? It's not like a personal knock. It's just
Who, Ramos or AOC?
no Gonzalez
Ramos?
Rojas. Rojas.
Rojas?
Yeah, yeah. But let's look at
Okay.
it. So I was up in Albany just to get this out. I was in Albany for Black Caucus weekend, and we were kind of walking through the Capitol. I was with some of my people, locally, and we came across Rojas walking with Tiffany Caban, actually. And it might have been one other person. And they were like, Queens in the house. Like they recognized we were all like from Queens. Like I said, different parts of Queens, right? Like I'm South Queens here. They're up more Northwest Queens. But we all recognize each other as being Queens people up in Albany for this caucus weekend. And we just started chatting. Doesn't mean that we share the same politics, we agree on everything, well, whatever. Like it was just a cordial meeting of Queens people involved in this political thing. And she went over right up to me and said, "Hi, I'm Jessica." And she was just very sweet, like very nice person. So I got nothing bad to say on a personal level. I believe she also lended her support for Queens Link on more than one occasion, right? And I think Ramos might have done
Okay.
the same.
Okay.
So we can have disagreements about particular policy points, but I'm not here to knock people personally. I think these are, from what I've seen, good people. Like I said, we may
Right.
disagree on things, but it is what it is. That being said, if certain things rub me the wrong way, or I'm just not feeling a certain way about them, I'm going to be honest about that, and we'll give them time to make adjustments. If she comes out and uh, articulates and identifies particular votes that Ramos took that she has issue with, or something beyond the endorsement of Cuomo, I'm all ears.
Mm.
You know what I mean? But like I said, as of now, it's just something is giving me the ick about it. So let me pull up her statement here. This is 10 hours ago on Twitter. "I'm running for state senate because the people of Corona, East Elmhurst, and Jackson Heights deserve leadership that listens, builds trust, and delivers for Queens. I am unwavering in my values, and I will never stop fighting for equity, dignity, and justice." Okay. So the part there, I'm unwavering in my values, that's the part where she's trying to hammer Ramos on, right? And again, I think that
Think she's taking a shot at her on that.
Yeah, and I think it's so unless unless I'm wrong or unless they do something that shows me otherwise. As of now, this seems to be solely about her endorsement of Cuomo, right?
But I mean, couldn't it also be that like she always had designs on going the next level as far as seats go, and she just saw that right now, okay, she's having some trouble. There's a time to try to get in.
Yeah,
Not that it's
she was not
necessarily
going to go.
because of the her endorsement of Cuomo, like
Mhm.
because ideologically that she
Yeah,
was opposed to her endorsement of Cuomo, but maybe because the endorsement of Cuomo made her weak to where Rojas saw, okay, I have a better shot now.
yep,
Not
yeah,
that,
yeah. Like I said, I would bet any amount of money that Rojas was not going to challenge Ramos if not for this, right? Or to your point, maybe something else that would be very similar that would weaken her with the progressive base where she thought she had a shot now. That's what this is. This is her saying, Ramos is weakened by this Cuomo endorsement. She is ripe for being primary. There's already a lot of talk about who's going to primary Ramos. I'm going to step up and do it, right? That's what this is about. Now, is that the way this is being discussed by Rojas? At least, no, right? I mean, if she would have said what you just said, that would be a lot more honest, I think. But maybe that's asking too much of a politician, also. And then I think it kind of brings it back to my original point. These are politicians playing politics. Let's not pretend otherwise.
right, sure. Um, yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, that there are two ways of looking at it, right? Like, Um, she's running because ideologically endorsing Cuomo is a problem. You're no longer with the progressives. You're no longer what we do. Or she's running because that endorsement of Cuomo made Ramos politically weaker with the base, and she saw an opportunity to elevate herself or get into the seat that she maybe already had designs on, but Ramos was too strong to challenge. So
Right.
yeah. So. I don't know if that's opportunistic though.
Isn't that pretty much the definition of opportunism?
I mean, I guess, but like not in a negative way. I think more of
Well,
a
if they were honest about it, though, I mean,
just
how would
opened
you
up
feel?
possibilities.
Say what?
It just opened up a possibility.
It opened up, yeah, it opened up, which wasn't there before, and she wasn't going to run before, so she's doing it now.
Right.
And yeah, you're right. There's nothing inherently wrong with picking your battles, right? Taking advantage of the
Yeah,
opportunities
sure.
that are presented to you. But to me, there's just, I don't know, a feeling of hypocrisy there about you know, attacking Ramos for being opportunistic, right? Because that's what they're saying. They're saying that she did it for her own
Uh,
benefit. They're saying that she made a deal with Cuomo because she thought he was the favorite, he was going to win, and that was going to benefit her somehow. Either he was going to appoint her to, a fancy
right.
job, or maybe it was going to help her district somehow, resources, whatever. That was kind of the angle on that. And all right, so cool. That's your attack on her. You're saying she didn't do it for politically pure reasons. She didn't really believe in that. She just did it for opportunistic reasons or pragmatic
Right.
reasons. But now you're doing the same thing. You're attacking her for doing that, but you're doing the same thing.
Yeah, I guess.
And
I
also, can we not have these rigid purity tests all the damn time? I mean, can people not be free to endorse whom they want to endorse? Now, I get it if she went and turned around and endorsed a Republican or like crazy, but we're talking about a Democratic candidate, a Democratic primary. Can we not have a little bit of leeway to make our own political decisions and not try to eat? And I guess I shouldn't put myself in the mix here because I don't subscribe to this, but I'm seeing this amongst Democrats, right? There is a certain lane of Democrats that's doing this. They're eating each other based on endorsement decisions. And, like I said, she may have the same voting record that Rojas would have if she got into the Senate. But because
right.
what's the wrong person? That like the person that doesn't sit at the pool table, we're going to kick you out the party. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. That almost comes off as bullying to me.
I don't know. I think I don't know if I'd go bullying. It just yeah, I don't think I'd go that far with it. She's just not, you know. maybe she's just like it saw an opportunity to win in. And again, I don't know what her motivation is on it. And I think we'd be fooling ourselves if we assume that not, if not all politicians have some personal motivation to
We don't know
run
her
for the.
motivation. I mean, I don't know. This is pretty clear.
I
But
think
then,
it's speculative right now. We're
uh,
speculating a lot.
how much are we really speculating, though? How much really? I mean, come on, come on. This was like, you can see this from a
I
mile
think we're
away.
speculating.
What are we speculating about? What do you think we're
We're
speculating?
speculating on her motives. That it's because of a purity test or because, I think that's all speculative. We don't
Dude,
really know for sure why.
it's patently
Now,
obvious. Ramos was not going to
now,
be challenged until this happened, and here she
yeah,
comes.
but it has nothing to do with that doesn't necessarily have to be because of a purity test. That could just be because the opportunity presented itself, not because she failed some purity test. You know
That's
what I'm
what
saying?
I'm saying, though. No, but I'm saying she is taking advantage of
Sure.
Ramos's perceived failure of the purity test. Yeah, I think it's more of a pragmatic decision on her part. I think she's saying, now I have my shot because the progressive
Absolutely.
base is mad at Ramos for failing the purity test, and I'm going to come in and say I'm pure. I'm in a white dress. She can't wear white anymore. That's what this is. But I don't know. I mean, here's the thing. It's so patently obvious what's going on. Even if she were to come out and say that, I don't know if that would be much of a leap from where we are, right? And what if her campaign statement was, I'm primarying Jessica Ramos because she endorsed Andrew Cuomo for mayor? I mean, I think she'll still be getting the support that she's getting. Maybe it'll come off a little bit more honest, but if you read between the lines, it's almost like she's already saying that because everyone knows what time it is.
She could probably ingratiate herself a little bit more with the progressives if she came out and said it like that.
I
Like,
don't know if it'll
listen,
make a difference because everyone knows that's what's going on. You know, I don't know. But maybe we'll be keeping it too real. Maybe that would be keeping it too real for her.
I don't know.
Do you think
I
that
don't
would come
know.
off as less hypocritical? I mean, because either way, it's opportunistic, right? So, because if she says, I'm doing it because Ramos is weak due to her endorsement of Cuomo, then she's very nakedly saying she's doing it for opportunistic reasons, I guess. I guess she can combine that with the purity stuff too and say, she is weak and that's why I have a chance to beat her now. However, I don't think she should have done that. I wouldn't have done that. I'm more pure. Okay, then now she's combining the two angles, I guess. Would that come off as less hypocritical though? If she just said, she's an opportunist, I'm an opportunist, I just have a better opportunity than she does right now.
Oh, I don't know. I think, it's of course there's some opportunistic uh implications here, right? Um whether she agrees with uh, her endorsement of Cuomo or whether she even cares. She might not even care about that. She just sees an opening lane and maybe I'm going to try to take my shot right now. Um, so I don't. I think it's we're still kind of speculating on what her motives are in doing so.
Come on, speculating.
I
I,
think we
this is
for
all
look for all we
clear.
know she could have also been like, you know what, I think I'm down with some Cuomo, Ma'am Donnie,
No,
maybe Ma'am Donnie
Rojas does
walked
not
there and
know, but
did.
he wasn't, man. Rojas was all on the Mamdani train, pissed off at Ramos for backing Cuomo, at least publicly. You're saying that maybe a private, so maybe you're saying she's even a bigger hypocrite than we know. You're
Oh
saying
no, I'm just saying I
maybe
didn't know about her
privately she's
support.
like all about Cuomo and maybe even some Sliwa on the side.
No, I'm just oh now you're throwing some awesome kind of extra in there. I'm just saying like, it could have been a mix of stuff. Now, I mean, it sounds like I think at the very least we could say with the most surety, I
Mhm.
don't know, is that she saw the opening
Yeah.
and she's going for it. Now, she could have,
Oh,
like I said, she could have previously thought, at some point I want to go for that seat, but Ramos has just been very strong, so she's never thrown her hat in a ring. Um, and but at some point, because every
I don't want to lose the
politician,
base. That's what it is. They all share the same
sure,
base in good times.
sure.
Ramos hasn't
And so
lost a
she
lot.
sees that the base is
Right.
not happy with
Yeah.
her and
Yeah.
says, you
Yeah.
know what? Listen, I can execute where you're unhappy with her. I can execute in that lane as well. So, I might be the choice you're looking for right now.
I
I think
just
we know.
Yeah, I just want to give people the space to have free thought, and that's whether we agree with their
Sure.
thoughts or not. You know what I mean? And listen, it's politics, so yeah, that's part of the game, right? If you take an unpopular stance, or if you take a stance someone disagrees with, part of the game is they can challenge you on that and say, "Well, I don't think that's where the voters are, so I'm going to run," and
Sure.
hold your feet to the fire on that and see where the chips fall. Yeah, all good, right?
Absolutely.
But I do have some sympathy for Ramos here for
Mm.
going against the grain. And I just don't like this. Like it's like a pack of hyenas. Here they come. They're all gonna like try to kick her out for daring to say something that didn't exactly toe the line, right? And I would feel that way if it went the other way, right? Like if someone, I don't know, who's more moderate endorsed Mamdani, and all of a sudden they kick them out. It's like, all right, why don't we have a little bit more of a nuanced conversation here about what they are about, right? Like, let's look at their votes in office. Let's look at
Right.
what they've really done, what they stand for, as opposed to, you said the wrong thing on Tuesday, so on Wednesday, you're no longer in the cool club. You know what I mean? I think we should be giving people a little bit more free reign to make decisions and not be political robots, because I don't think we get good representatives when they're expected to be robots.
Sure, sure. But I'm just saying that we don't know necessarily that that's what her reason for doing it. She could just be identifying that political opportunity because the base is upset with Ramos, and she's like, okay, there's a shot now. I may have a shot here.
Sure. So what you're saying is, I guess there's a scale, right? On the one hand, there's a level of opportunism present. There's also a level of purity and how she really feels, right? Like how offended she really is about the endorsement. We don't know if how much of that is performative, how much of it is genuine, but there's a
Yeah.
scale, right? There's
Unless
some
she comes out
opportunism
and
here.
says,
There's some purity here, and we don't know exactly where she falls on that scale.
right. And unless she comes out and says just like blatantly, like, how dare she endorse Cuomo?
I wish she had said that though, but she has definitely said it repeatedly. There's
She
no
said
question about it.
specifically, she
Oh,
said
we can pull
specifically,
up
like,
before she announced she was running for Senate. Let's look. Let's look at her timeline. Let's
like
check
how dare
receipts.
she endorsed Cuomo, she has betrayed you. So you need to come with, go with me as your choice now.
This is before.
Like, that's
Let's
more blatant in that regard.
before
Now,
before Rojas even said she was running. I'm saying she has definitely critiqued Ramos for endorsing Cuomo.
okay, okay. I mean, and
Well,
listen,
if we can
I
find them.
think if she knows the base is irritated by that, I'm pretty sure she's going to use that as an attack point in the campaign against her.
Yeah,
So you're deep in research right
I
now.
was. Yeah, maybe I should like do some searching here to see. Let's see. Like if I actually search Ramos Cuomo, can I get her?
We need to get Ramos and Rojas on the show and have them battle it out.
Here we go. So June 6th, Jessica Gonzalez-Rojas posts a New York Times article. Headline is Jessica Ramos, former Cuomo critic, endorses him for New York City mayor. And Rojas's tweet, her commentary on that, one word, disappointing.
Well, listen, she was a former Cuomo critic. It's a pretty
Well, she was running against him, let's not forget, for mayor at one point.
oh yeah, but that doesn't necessarily mean she's a critic of Cuomo. Like what,
She was definitely critiquing him on the campaign trail. Here's interesting. Okay. Oh, I see. But this, I guess, because I'm searching. You know why? Because I'm searching. I was looking to see. I was looking to see all the mentions that Rojas had publicly of Ramos. So you go back. You know, she wrote a letter with Ramos, and they were all cool. They were all friends prior to this happening.
well, that, if they were all friends, there could be something else as well there, like they've had conversations like, you know what, you know, in regards to Cuomo or what Cuomo represents, and maybe they've had these conversations and then they're like, wow, after all we've talked about, you're going to endorse him? Like, yeah, that's disappointing. That's wild. Like, for example, if you posted your top five and Lil Wayne was on the list, I would respond like, yeah, that's disappointing. Like, what's going on here, Mike? You
Okay.
know?
Okay.
So
And
we've talked about
got the
this.
hip hop club. I get my hip hop card revoked the next day for him.
We've talked about this. What's happening here?
It just seems to me like there's pressure, and I've seen it in other iterations as well. This isn't the only example of it, right? And maybe it's a little personal to me because I saw our state senator get attacked for endorsing me, right? There were press conferences attacking him for
Sure.
endorsing
No,
me. You know what I
absolutely.
mean? And so it's like,
Absolutely.
why are we trying to this? It does come off as bullying in a sense. It just does, like, because people are trying to
Okay. Yeah.
force they're trying to force these elected officials to do everything, like to be in lockstep with them. They can't have their own thought. They can't be diversity of thought. Everything has to be exactly the way that they
Because they want to
demand
control the
it.
progression.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, it's like the party wants to control the progression to organize the pieces the way they want the pieces to be
But the
organized
party,
instead
it's
of.
that lane, right? It's that leftist lane of the party.
But even I think in general too, the party also, they get behind or put certain
Right.
amount of effort behind certain candidates to make sure that they or try to make sure they get in the position because that's what the party wants to happen. And not just Democrats, but all of them
Yeah.
do these things. And it kind of, in that way, it's kind of undercutting democracy a bit if they're trying to like finagle who gets
Right.
in
I agree.
where,
I agree. Yeah. Draw
just like
whoever does it.
just like when the 2012 campaign, right, popped up and like, hey, we're going for Congress
Right.
seat here. There are a lot of people upset because you're cutting the line. How dare you?
Right. Right.
This is the way that we lay it out. How
Right.
dare you? You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right. But don't you also think that there's more of that purity test business on the extremes? And probably you'll see it on the political right as well. But whether it's the Democrats or Republicans, the more you get to the fringes, the more ideologically pure they want you to be.
I think there's probably more, and I think we've talked about this a little bit. There's more purity tests on the left
Mm-hmm.
than on the right. I think what the right can do is they may have some purity tests, but they also can identify the larger point that they hate and aim for that. Whereas in the left side, the liberal side, the progressive side, there are so many different sort of points that people latch on to that you've got to 100% hang from that sack, or you just are a betrayer of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the weakness in that side, because
Yeah.
there's less of a nuance there. There's less of an understanding that this is not the same all around. Like you've got to also recognize this clear and present danger. What direction are we moving in? What policies are we trying to put forth? You can't itemize everything all the time.
Right. Do you think that's also a function of young people tending to gravitate more towards the political extremes? And maybe the younger you are, the less nuanced you're going to see the world in a sense. Like, the less wisdom, I guess, you have, the less maybe perspective you have, like, to see other points of view or see it another way, or, realize the shortcomings of certain things, or it's not all as black and white as you think it is, type thing. And so maybe that's why you have a lot of young people occupying that space who also demand this purity of you, right? Because they kind of lack in that nuance.
I think some of that does play into it. And I think we saw some of that again with the Bernie Bros, right? Like we saw recently with the presidential campaign, Kamala versus Trump, and they're like, well, Kamala didn't come outright and denounce Israel, so we're not going to support her, even though the alternative is going to be far worse. But no, this is your purity test, and I can't bring myself to do this. You're missing what's ahead of it because you're not thinking the rest of the whole field, the forest for the trees, so to speak, type of thing. And I think you see some of that with maybe some of the younger folks, some of the more um, strictly ideological folks, some of the strict activist folks,
Mhm.
some of the strict progressives. And I think you see more of that. And I could be wrong, but I think you see more of that on the left than on the right, which is why the left is in such disarray.
Yeah.
And the right has been able, this far right extremism, autocracy has been able to you got the word, proliferate, uh, as much
Yeah.
as it has, because there's so much of this purity test and lack of nuance on the left.
Yeah. Yeah. It does seem like people on the far left tend to regard their top enemies as people on the center left. And people on the right tend to regard everyone left of center as their enemy, as opposed to people.
Right. And so there's unity in that. There's
Yeah,
strength
yeah,
in that.
right. People like, I guess people right of center don't get the heat as much. And this may go back to your question last week. You were like, why do you think people on the right have been more successful running to the far right than people on the left have been running to the far left? I think there's more unity on the right in general, right? So while the base might be rabid, you might get the lunatics on both sides, far left and far right. Once the primary is over, it seems like people who are conservative identifying, Republican identifying, right of center, they say, all right, maybe I didn't get my preferred choice in the primary, but the real enemy, to them would be anyone left of center. And so they're going to kind of hold their nose and vote for that Republican candidate because that's preferable, right? Regardless of who the
Right.
nominee is. Whereas on the
Right.
left, it's like, yeah, it feels like public enemy number one to them are other Democrats who don't pass their purity test. They care more about that seemingly than winning
Right.
against Republicans. So they'll
Right.
sometimes gleefully lose a general election if it means proving a point about not getting their preferred Democratic candidate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's one of the big problems on the left. Um, and that's kind of helped lead us to where we're at right now. It's quite crazy. So
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I guess again, we'll see how this plays out and what the coming statements are during the campaign, how Ramos responds, right? I think that's fair. We
right.
have to take a look at that. I just don't think we want a system where everyone's expected to toe every single line and be a political robot with no free thought. I mean, what use is that? So what are we electing the best
Right.
tweeter now? Like who can retweet the hardest? You know what I mean? Like I think we want people who are able to be leaders and say, all right, listen, all right, maybe I agree with you guys more than you guys over here, but I'm going to take every issue as it comes. And I'm not always going to say what you want to hear. I'm going to say what I think is best. And maybe I'll deviate a little bit from the script sometimes, but that's why you elected me, right? Because you believe that
Right.
I have the people's best interest at heart. And I'm going to take bold steps to further our society in a positive way, even if it means taking some heat sometimes. I mean, you know what I mean? I think that's the kind of leader that you want, as opposed to someone just trying to check all the right boxes every day. I don't know. Call me crazy.
Yeah, I think so. And then an extension of that, or at least a more macro position from that is then even after that point, you also recognize, who the real opposition might be,
Right.
and make sure that even if you don't agree on every little thing, the real opposition is who you're all supposedly collectively
Mhm.
trying to displace.
Right.
And take steps to move in that regard.
Well,
So
yeah, that's it's a hard pill for some people to swallow, but I think it's where we got to get to somehow.
right.
We got to get to that point. So we wanted to talk about briefly, I guess, what is going on at Columbia because there are new developments today, right? Relating
Yeah,
back
what
to,
happened?
yeah. So this relates back to the protests that happened in May, right? Over Palestine and Israel. There were students who took over the library at Columbia and they were wearing masks and concealing their identities. And public safety officers demanded that they show their Columbia ID to make sure they weren't trespassing. When they refused to do so, people got arrested. There were reports that the officers maybe were a little aggressive with some of these protesters, right? But nonetheless, a lot of them did get in trouble over it. And it appears that Colombia is trying to get its funding from the federal government because they're being accused of not doing enough to combat anti-Semitism on campus in the face of these protests, right? And everything else going on there. So today, we have found out that Colombia is disciplining 70 students for this protest back in May amidst the school's pleads with the White House for funding. And I think they're trying to get $400 million. Is that the figure that we saw? Let's see. Federal
So they're
officials
trying to
in
get
February
funding.
they froze $400 million. Yeah, so they're trying to get that money back.
So they're trying to get the funding, and basically they're kowtowing to the Trump administration by offering up the students to some degree.
That's how it appears, at least from some of this reporting here. Like I was saying in the pregame, it's hard to make a judgment call on what happened, especially when you're talking about 70 people. You know what I mean? How can we sit here and say that none of those 70 people deserved discipline or the kind of discipline that they got, right? We weren't there. We didn't see it. And all you can see is clips sometimes when people present things the way they want to present them. But it's things happen.
Sure,
And,
but I think
my
we
thing is
probably
also, okay,
I know I was going to say we probably need at least a little bit more information on that.
right.
I don't like that they're doing this in an effort to get funding from the Trump administration. That is very corrupt in my opinion. It looks so
That's
very
how it
much on
is
the
being
surface.
it's being presented by some, right? I'm sure Columbia wouldn't cast it that way themselves, right? But some of the reporting kind of puts that spin on it. So, I think you got to take everything with a grain of salt here. Things get spun to fit whatever narrative the person is trying to push, unfortunately. Uh, I'm focusing as, I guess, a lawyer. I'm looking at some of the finer legal points here, right?
Hmm.
Trespass was really at the heart of this. And of course, we said these students or these people, we don't even know if they were all students, right, who were occupying the library, they were concealing their faces. And the officials said, if you can present your Columbia ID to show that you're a student, then you're not trespassing. Now, maybe some people were afraid to do that because they thought it was a trap, right? Like if I show my ID, now they're going to know who I am, and maybe they're going to suspend me or expel me, do something else to me. Who knows? But I understand from a legal perspective, if you're not showing who you are, you're refusing to show your identity, then you're presumed to be trespassing, are you not? I mean, is it a loophole that you can just cover yourself and go anywhere you want in the world on any private property and say, well, you can't prove that I'm not trespassing, therefore I'm allowed to be here? You know what I mean? I mean, if authorities are trying to discern whether you're trespassing or not, you kind of have to show that you're not.
Well, I think here's the way I look at it. I don't think anyone should have to be forced to identify themselves.
Mhm.
You shouldn't have to, if you're wearing a mask, you shouldn't be forced to take it off or have to show identity. We're not, show me your papers, Nazi Germany type of thing. On the other hand,
Yeah.
to if you don't show your Columbia ID, I can see where the security says, well, okay, you don't have to show me who you are.
Right.
But if you don't present the Columbia ID, then you have to leave the campus.
Right.
You very well could be a Columbia student. That's fine. But if we don't know that, and our job is to make sure there's no trespassing here, and you're not going to show us, then I'm going to have to escort you off the property.
Right.
Um,
And if they
so
refuse,
I,
you have like a standoff situation. What do you do?
right. So I get that part of the situation.
Yeah,
Um,
no, I agree. I agree with that aspect of it. Now, of course, there was this whole angle of, well, the governor was trying to push for stronger restrictions on mask wearing, right? And that was part of the budget negotiations. And I looked it up. Apparently, there was a law passed in New York in 1845 that
mhm.
banned mask wearing in public. And this was repealed by Cuomo when Cuomo was governor during COVID in 2020 for obvious reasons, right? But there was a law dating back to 1845. Now, I don't think that law was enforced too often, right? Because it's like one of those laws that you read about from the 1800s or earlier, and you're like, huh, I can't believe that's still a law. Technically, it's still right. But you can see situations like maybe if someone was wearing a mask in the commission of a crime, they were sticking someone up. Maybe in addition to those charges, they got some added mask wearing charges in there as well. I don't
I think
know.
that's
I'm speculating that might have happened, right? But that law was taken off the books during COVID, right? Now, Kathy Hochul was trying to put some version of it back in response, largely, I think, to what happened at Columbia. And it didn't go really that far in the budget. I think we talked about it when they passed the budget. There were negotiations over it, and it was like, all right, well, we're not going to give it to you the way you want it, but it got something like if you commit a crime while wearing a mask, the charges can be upped, basically, right? It's like it exacerbates the guilt, but that wasn't the mask ban that they were hoping for.
yeah, I think there's a lot wrong there. First of all, a mask ban I think is completely stupid. I think people should be able to, especially now after COVID. There are people who are gonna be wearing masks more than they would have before because it's just now it's part of the society, it's part of the culture now. People will wear them. They get a cold, they get something, they're gonna wear a mask. So to ban that, I think is ridiculous. Even before COVID, I think it would be ridiculous. Um, and then this idea of adding, if you commit a crime, there's this charge. But if you commit a crime while wearing the mask, well, then it's gonna be higher. I think that's even stupider and even more petty. Like it's like, of course, the person's gonna commit the crime with a mask on because they're committing a crime. You don't add a
Right, but
charge for
well,
wearing a mask. It's so stupid.
do you see though how that can be seen as a deterrent, right? Like, you
Not a
know,
deterrent.
well, meaning this, like if someone,
You think someone is going to commit the crime and be like, you know what? Um, I don't want to get those extra 2 years, so I'm going to take the
oh, that's
mask
not
off
that's
and
not
make
what
it
I mean.
more
No, no, no,
possible that I
that's,
get
that's,
identified.
that's not what I mean. What I mean is like if someone is walking into the store with the mask on, if it's illegal for them to do that, then maybe you can stop that person before they actually take out a gun and stick up the store, as opposed to having to
But what
wait
if
for the gun out.
what if they got a cold? What if they've got the flu and they're going into the store and they don't want to either get more germs or get other people sick? Like,
Right.
should they be forced to not wear a mask going into the store? First of all, if you got the flu and you're wearing a mask, yeah, I'm happy for that. I don't want you coughing on me. Stay the heck away from me if
Yeah.
you've got that
You
type
know
of
that a
stuff.
lot of people were using that as an excuse also, right? Like a lot of people coming out
I'm
of the
sure.
pandemic were going into stores wearing masks and then committing criminal acts in the store,
I'm
knowing that
sure.
they wouldn't be seen as suspicious for wearing a mask, whereas they would have been before, right? Pre-COVID, if you walk into a store in New York with a mask on, right, a ski mask over your face, people are going to freak
Right.
out. They're going to think you're there to stick up the store or do something criminal, right? No
Sure.
one's going to be like, maybe he's wearing a mask because he has a cold or the flu. That wouldn't have been a thought people would have. It would be he's
Sure.
no good. Why else is he covering his face, right? And you would start to see signs.
Unless you were in Chinatown, but go ahead.
Well, yeah, yeah. I don't even know if Chinatown in Asia, yes, but we're talking about in New
Yeah.
York. But you started to see signs in store windows, right? Like, and I would say like during the tail end of COVID, coming out of COVID, saying that please remove your mask before coming in here because those particular stores probably had incidents where people would come in and rob them under the guise of
Sure.
being masked for COVID, right? So
Sure,
people
sure.
were using it that way.
No,
Now,
I'm sure people were taking advantage of it. Absolutely.
now here's an interesting wrinkle in this as well. The 1845 law that I mentioned, it prohibited masks in public spaces in response to the anti-rent movement at the time, where tenant farmers disguised themselves to protest their landlords. So you can draw some parallels here to what's going on now in the sense of these are protesters disguising
Mm.
themselves because they wanted, I guess, to be able to protest anonymously without the repercussions of whatever laws they might have been breaking or school policies they were breaking or whatever. Uh, you know,
Or they may not have been breaking laws. Let's make that clear
Right, or
Protests
school,
are not necessarily breaking laws.
or school policies. Right, but I was saying, why were they
Right.
wearing a mask? They wanted their identities. Okay, maybe let's be charitable. Maybe they were afraid of being doxxed by people who disagree with them on the other
Sure.
side.
Absolutely.
So there are various reasons they might have been doing it, but it's kind of funny here that the 1845 law, right, was aimed to suppress protests, in particular protests against powerful people, right? These were tenant farmers
And
protesting.
that's supposed to be, and that's anti-American.
And so you are seeing, you can draw parallels, I guess, to the
Sure.
Hochul attempt to ban masks again, right? Not
Right.
saying that morally it's the same thing, right? Protesting Israel and Palestine versus protesting landlord farmers. I'm not
Sure.
trying to draw equivalencies there. I'm just saying
Right.
the macro issue, right? Of
Right.
banning masks because protesters were doing that who were afraid of their identities being revealed, right? By people
Right.
perceived to be more powerful than them. They were going to ruin their lives if they found out who they were, right? You're kind of seeing history
Sure.
repeat itself in that regard from 1845 to 2025.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, you know, there have definitely been examples in history and in present day where it would be prudent to conceal your identity if you're protesting the power structure, because of either being doxxed or or something by the powerful, the government, the law enforcement. It's it makes sense in many regards, and so, and the thing is, to have that blowback from the power structure or from the government for protesting is anti-American. Protesting the power is supposed to be one of the things that we have over the rest of the world. That's part of our
Yes.
promotion package,
Yeah.
you know, that
Agreed.
we tell everyone.
Agreed. First
So,
Amendment, right? The right to,
yeah,
yeah, to express yourself the way you see fit. That it's not just free speech. It's
yeah,
like we said, a free expression, free association, right? The petition is part of that, right? So participating in the
yes,
democratic process that way is supposed to be our most core value. However,
right.
it doesn't give you the right to break other laws, right?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, but you can't trespass while you're doing it. You can't be violent. You can't do things that are still illegal, as long
Sure.
as the laws don't target the speech, right? And this is a Supreme Court test that'll happen, right? But,
Right.
it's down from the Supreme Court to the lower courts, even. Is the law a time? What's it called? A time and manner restriction, I think it's called. But it has to be gender. It has to be. I don't know where I got that from. It has to
Gender
be
neutral?
gender neutral. It has to be viewpoint neutral, right? So if you're going to restrict these activities, you can't do it in a way that favors one viewpoint over another, right? And we have debates over, which laws are doing that in different ways. But that's the basic constitutional framework, right? That we have our First Amendment, and yes, there can be restrictions placed on these First Amendment activities, like we said, at the time, what you do it, the manner in which you do it. You can't attack people while you're doing it physically. You know what I mean? But it can't discriminate against a viewpoint. Now, here is my, I guess, bottom line on is, yes, while we welcome and celebrate everyone's right to protest, you can't have your cake and eat it too. If you're doing so in a way that breaks laws, like we saw during the civil rights movement, right? Some people purposely got arrested, right? They did boycott,
Sure.
stand-ins, sit-ins, all that kind of stuff to break the laws, in many cases to show that the laws were unjust and to challenge those laws in court, right? That was a big part of it.
Absolutely.
But nonetheless, they purposely broke laws and they purposely subject themselves to arrest for this
Right.
doing so. If you want to do that, that's your right to do it. You go ahead and do that. But there
Absolutely.
are consequences, right? You are signing yourself up for the consequences of such.
Right.
It's not supposed to be easy. It's if you're going to be the martyr, if you wish, right? Yeah. What does that mean? That means that you're going to catch heat for doing it. Hopefully, for the greater good. Hopefully, you take that flack for a greater change to society, right? That's the idea behind it. So
Right.
these people now at Columbia who are protesting, they want to be free from the consequences of such. Well, if they're breaking the school's policy in furtherance of their goals, they have to be prepared for the school to say, listen, you are no longer in compliance with our policy, right? We're going to take appropriate action against you. Maybe they still, in their mind, did something good, right? Because they called attention to the issue. And maybe they even challenged, if they got arrested, maybe they challenged that arrest. Maybe they said that we shouldn't have been arrested, or, the law that we're challenging is wrong, or the policy is wrong, right? We're going to challenge it in court. We're going to challenge it all these different ways. Fine. But there's still that blowback that you're going to get from that. I think you need to be prepared for that heat. And, you can't expect
Sure.
you just step into that fire and not get burned.
Absolutely. The part of it that I don't like is that is the administration, the White House
Mm.
kind of pushing that point on the university, um, by withholding funding to do so. I think without that outside influence, there'd probably something be a different sort of discourse with the protesters and the university. Now
Mm.
you've got political motivations that have seeped into it, and to me, that either crosses the line or is pretty much standing on that line of the First Amendment protections.
I was just going to say that, right? Because now you're dealing with issues of the government putting
The
its thumb on the
government.
scale, right? In terms of not just the time and manner, right? But of the actual viewpoint, arguably.
Right. And let's be clear, it's not ambiguous, where the president stands, where Trump stands on what they've done, the protest. In protests in general, he's made it pretty clear that he's not on board with them. But so the motivation behind the White House stepping in or making some phone calls there does either, like I said, either stands on that line or is crossing over into violations of the First Amendment territory, and that I'm not comfortable with.
Time, place, and I don't know why I couldn't think of the full phrase: time, place, and manner restrictions. Those are the lawful, right, limitations on First Amendment activity, as long as, like we said, they're viewpoint
Yeah.
neutral. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, there's a lot to discuss here, and we can have a whole show on this topic. But I did want to get that out because this is a new development that we saw today on this issue.
Right, absolutely. So, well, hopefully, nothing happens in their regard. Because we saw what was the guy, the protester that had to go through or is
Oh
facing
yeah, that was part of it.
deportation
Yeah,
and all of this for exercising the right to protest. And it's just that's not supposed to happen here. It's just not supposed to. And that's a problem.
yeah, yeah. I think it was summed up on a previous episode here. When you're young, you're supposed to be a little idealistic. You're supposed to be a little bit naive, even maybe. But
Mm,
you protest if you wish for what you believe in. That's all. That's all good. That's all part of what you should be
that's
doing.
how we get change. That's
Yeah,
how we get change.
especially at a college. I mean, even if you're not entirely right, right? Because let's be honest, like some of these protests went out of hand, right? And you saw people saying some crazy things at these protests, and you had a lot of Jewish students who felt very threatened by what was being said. I mean, that's all part of this. But nonetheless, if people are doing it peacefully, if they're not crossing any legal lines, certainly, if they're not violating school policy, certainly, they should be free to do so. Now, if they want to take it a step further and start violating policy, breaking laws, they should be prepared for the consequences that come with that, right? Maybe they think that's what they should be doing. Well, again, they're free to make those choices, and I think,
Right.
as Americans should allow people to make those choices. But I think we also should be prepared to say, listen, if you break the rules, that there are real ramifications, and you might no longer be allowed to go to Columbia anymore, right? But if that's the stand you want to take, then it's your choice.
Sure, sure. People factor in some of those things into their strategy for the protests. So
Right, right.
yeah, I just don't like the government stepping in on something like this.
Yeah, there is some
That's very
bullying. I,
problematic.
I agree with you that there is. Again, we talked about bullying, right? It feels like
It is absolutely bullying.
they're saying,
Yeah,
yeah, we're not going to give you the money, unless you behave exactly the way we want you to here. And that's like, yeah, they're trying to control what goes on, uh,
absolutely.
for the sake of promoting their political viewpoint, it seems, rather than what's best
Sure.
for the institution, right?
Well, it's the same thing that the administration did with basically all of these institutions, saying, listen, if you don't get rid of these certain types of courses or these certain types of practices, then we're going to cut off funding it. Then and that's in regards to DEI types of practices and whatnot.
Okay. Yeah. So I think now, coming out of this discussion, we do have a good bottom line for the episode, right? Because
Okay, there we go. Let's get
I
it.
this all together, and that is we should be allowing people the freedom to express themselves the way they see fit, right? To associate the way that they want to associate, to make their own decisions, right? Expressive choices. We shouldn't be trying to bully people, I don't think, out of self actualization, right? Or the ability to move the way that they want to move, right? And yes, we said there are potential consequences. You might get primaried for that choice. You might get expelled from Columbia for that choice, right? Things can happen. But nonetheless, I think we live in a society where we want to encourage that free expression. I guess that also means we can come down on whatever side we want. We sympathize with Ramos or Rojas on this. That's our choice as well, right? We have choices, and we should celebrate them and understand every action has a reaction, and that's the way the world works. But let's embrace that.
I think so. Absolutely. Very good. Very good. Well, bottom line seemed effortless this time. So I guess what's left to
Came
say is
together.
that I guess people can find us on the internet, on YouTube and Facebook and everything at Nuance Show, and everywhere podcasts are available. Join the conversation, disagree, agree, you know, cuss at us, whatever. I don't care.
It's all good. As always, we've got work to do. We'll catch you next time.